Welcome to Normal Ireland Live. I'm Curtis Daly, and I'm joined by the wonderful editor of Novara Live, Stephen Methven, fresh off hosting from Novara Live. You've been busy. How are you?
I'm good. It has been a busy day. We were, some of your audience may have been watching trying a new rig, and so there were some hiccups. But yeah, I'm otherwise very good. Very excited to be back on, Curtis. Very, very honoured and pleased to be back on.
Well, that's very lovely because I'm very excited that you're back on, and I'm very honoured too. But we're going to have a cracking show. I know it. This is what we've got coming up on tonight's show. The Greens hit 18% in the polls, coming second place again. Labour plan to revive the soft left. A report finds that a third of boys think women's rights are unimportant. And Maccabi Tel Aviv Aston Villa game descends into chaos. You can help us grow by visiting turnleftmedia.co.uk/support to help fund our work by becoming a YouTube member for just 99p. But let's go on to our first story of the night. The Green Party are still breaking records. A new poll from Find Out Now has them second place again, but also at an all-time high. The Greens are polling at a whopping 18%, putting them 3 points clear of Labour. Reform is considerably ahead with 33%. Now, remember, Find Out Now do overrepresent Reform. Here's the picture when it comes to seats. Reform with 391. It is large. The Lib Dems, second on 73. And the Greens increasing their total from 4 MPs to 55. Now, I think the biggest shock of it all is that the Lib Dems, who are polling in 5th place, yet, according to this poll, they would become the official opposition. First past the post, right? It's so broken. Now, these polls on one hand show the surge of the Greens, but on the other hand, the uniting of the right-wing vote in contrast to the progressive vote still being split. Now, to caveat, Labour are not progressive, and I don't think the Lib Dems are either. But communication is key in politics. Policies, of course, matter, but the left had a lot of those already. The Green Party policies have almost been identical between Zach's current leadership and the previous co-leadership with Carla Denyer and Adrian Ramsey. Of course, policies such as abolishing landlords was passed after Zach was elected, and incredibly based, by the way. To contrast where the party is now with the 2024 election, here's how the results look for them. So as you can see, the Greens won 6.4% of the vote. And that was a record for them. It was a very good showing. They quadrupled the number of seats and they got 6.4%. Now, that's such a distant past now. The improvement on which the party has managed to reach people and effectively communicate their ideas has been really quite astonishing. Zach's bold leadership is delivering on exactly what he promised, and people are taking notice. Part of this new leadership is to drop the nice aesthetic. Criticism of the previous leaderships has been their lack of aggression, willingness to be divisive, and even perhaps they were too earnest. Zach instead opted to deliberately goad opponents and to even mock them and their attacks. Inviting more and more attacks from the corporate media, Zach is using that as a catapult. The more they attack, the better it is for him. Yet, our political opponents and those that serve the oligarchy still don't get it. This is Daniel Finkelstein moaning about the backlash he received after attacking the Green Party with Hugo Rifkind on Times Radio.
But it did occur to me that Zach Polanski, who's generally not somebody who kind of loses it, and who appeared to have done so in that response, possibly is just smarter at social media than I am, he realised that he was getting a lot of engagement and getting a lot of, and he gets members through engagement. Again, I completely get it.
I think you're inclined to be kinder than I am. I mean, perhaps even a bit earnest. I find that whole exchange depressing. I mean, genuinely depressing and almost upsetting, because I was disappointed in Polanski, and I had thought of Polanski. I quite like Zach Polanski. I don't obviously agree with him on things, but there are some things that he stands for that I do agree with, and I thought he was a good champion for them. And that whole thing made me realise that he's not in this to reach towards the centre and engage more Green.
No, of
more
course
people to
not.
vote Green.
But that's what I'm saying.
No, but I mean, what he's doing right now, what he used that for,
Is
he
it
used
to
he used
recruit
that
a
whole
certain type
exchange
of person?
to show himself to be the guy
he was
who
proving,
can represent the
he was
left
proving
rather
my
than Jeremy
point.
Corbyn.
He was proving my point, which is he is engaged in a fairly smart, fairly focused, social media driven strategy to turn the Greens into the main red party, appealing to about 15% of progressive activists with great success.
And not worry about the second category.
Now, it's interesting that Finkelstein says that he's only appealing to 50% of people, the radical leftist activists, while polling, as I've just shown you, blows that out of the water. He surged the party, currently at 18%, and it will go higher. Being respected by your opponents, being respected by those who hate your views, in my opinion, is not a good thing. They respect you if they think you are ineffective. Rifkin saying that he's disappointed in Zach is a good thing. It means Zach is making a difference. The point is that I think for far too long, the left has been or has put up with bad faith people, and it's a waste of time trying to earnestly debate some of them. Instead, he is bypassing the nonsense, and it's clearly working. Stephen, Finkelstein is claiming that Zach is trying to appeal to a small group of people rather than reach out. What do you make of his comments?
I felt like those two were harking back to a time which is long gone, or at least very quickly on its way out. Because what was said there was that he's not appealing to the centre, and that's where the majority of people are. Actually, the centre is rapidly vacating itself. People are leaving the centre and they're going to the right or they're going to the left. They're looking for a political home, which they think is going to make a difference to their material circumstances when the two major parties have made zero difference to their material circumstances, unless, of course, you're talking about making it worse, in which case they've succeeded amazingly in making people's material circumstances worse. So you have this old idea that, oh yeah, it's the sensibles in the middle. Those are the ones that we have to appeal to, the ones who are, worried about sort of minor marginal differences in tax, or who are worried about, perhaps, plenty of people will be worried about things like interest rates, but they'll be looking at things around them and seeing, the state is sort of slowly but surely failing to function, not just for people who rely on it, but for people in that centre who often don't rely on it so much, but can rather see the effects of that crumbling state all around them. So, yeah, when they talk about not appealing to like a minority of people who aren't in the centre or who are on the fringes, those fringes, as they call them, are growing and growing because people are recognising that the policies and the platforms of the two major parties, which are both tanking, absolutely tanking at an alarming rate for them, not for me, that those policies and platforms just don't serve them, and they need to look elsewhere for, honestly, more radical politics. And those radical politics lies, unfortunately, on the right as well as on the left. And the question here is a question of what radicalism is going to win out. One thing that Rifkind, I think, talked about there was about respect. And there's this sense that Zach doesn't go for the respect of this kind of elite media class. You're not appealing, he's not treating them with respect. That's not who you have to respect as a politician. Who you have to respect are the people who are going to vote for you. Who you have to respect, what you have to respect about those people are their needs and their requirements and their complaints about the state of Britain at the moment. And I think Zach is doing that very well, and I think he's communicating that very well. And that is what they don't like. They don't like that actually Rifkin and Finkelstein, they don't like that they are drifting away from the center of relevance in politics, just like politics is drifting away from the center amongst political parties.
I think someone needs to give Times Radio they didn't get the message that the centre ground is collapsing, because even like the rest of the mainstream media aren't really focusing on the centre ground. I'm sure Zach is quaking in his boots that he's upset Hugo Rifkin. Let's go back to the polling though. Right, it's good stuff from the Greens, but what are your thoughts on the wider picture? And that's Reform, who are just blowing everyone else out of the water.
I think that things are going to change for Reform, and I think part of that is bound up with economic arguments that Nigel Farage made at the beginning of this week, or not so much economic arguments, but rather a kind of economic positioning, where he talked about himself sort of presented reform as a responsible party of economic policy, where he said, we can't promise tax cuts, we have to be the grown-ups, so on and so forth. All of that language, grown-ups, no tax cuts, etc., fiscal responsibility, all of that is going to be so triggering for so much of his support. And an argument that I've made for a long time now in writing and on the show is that Farage has a real problem because, he's really a one-trick pony, and that trick is immigration. And he started off by cultivating a fairly extreme wing of anti-migration sentiment. But as he started to develop political ambitions towards running the country, well, he had to soften some of those views in order to make it more appealing to a wider part of the country. Now that he's getting closer to power, he's having to soften the economic views as well, because he knows he won't be able to actually carry out any of those promises. And he knows that as soon as he starts to build power with the kinds of economic policies that he had in the last manifesto, the markets will start to wobble. The markets will start to wobble in a way that will be really threatening to him. And so he'll water them down, and he's now preparing the ground to do that. So it's all going to be about watering down, because there's nothing economically radical about Farage. Farage is just an old-fashioned Tory, an old-fashioned neoliberal, and a self-enriching capitalist. So the radicalism is a kind of racist radicalism of reform, but that's not going to take him into power. And as he dissolves any sense of economic radicalism, as the economic reality of Nigel Farage and reform becomes more and more visible, his popularity is going to drift as well. I'm not saying that means that the Greens will go up, obviously. I think that means that the Tories will probably go back up. But that's the way that I see things at the moment. So I think, we're a long way out from an election. Farage has got a lot of positioning to do to carry him into Downing Street. Everyone's saying they're going to vote for him now, but it's not just, he's of the ilk. That means that it's not just about the electorate; it's also about the markets, and the markets are going to get unstable as he gets closer and closer to power, I think.
Yeah, an election is a long time away. I've also noticed that in lots of polling, they have kind of stagnated, apart from Find Out Now. Again, Find Out Now do slightly overblow them, but other polls, they are stagnating. And I do think Farage's intervention last week about basically saying austerity, saying the economic policies we champion are going to be the 14 years of austerity from under the Tories. That's basically what he said. Even their flagship policy of cutting taxes, they said they'd have to drop that. So hopefully that's put a big dent in them. But again, I agree, we've got a long time to wait. But I mean, the Greens on 18%, that's not something to not celebrate.
Can I say something about the flatlining?
Please do, yeah. Please.
I mean, I think, if a party is doing as well as Reform is doing and it starts flatlining, that could just indicate that they have actually just exhausted the natural support they have in the country, that they're not going to be able to get any of the other people from any of their parties to go for them, and they've kind of got everything. I don't think that's what's happening here. I think what's happening here is that they've kind of exhausted the natural support which is based on dissatisfaction with the two major parties. There'll be lots to gain from people who, for example, don't ordinarily vote, or for people who vote for the other parties. And the question is, how are they going to galvanize those people? And I think that for people who don't ordinarily vote, there isn't really anything exciting for them that has, there's nothing exciting for them that Reform's going to be able to offer that they haven't already offered, and otherwise, would have got them already. So it's really, I think it is a stagnation. But I think it's a stagnation that comes before a sort of drop as people start drifting maybe back to more secure ground.
Yeah, and I think as well, I mean, a lot of polls have them on 30% plus. Probably more realistically, you've got 25% of the country who maybe backs Farage, and that's it. It could be a ceiling. I do think, though, that the entire sort of non-voting cohort must be won by the left and the Greens. That's, I think, is very important. But thank you for that. We are going to move on to our second story of the evening. Now, with multiple resets from the government after just over 1 year since the election, the Labour Party is still struggling to find its identity. The party is now trying to engage in a revival of the so-called soft left. Now, senior MPs who were the architects of the Labour Welfare Rebellion are to revive a powerful caucus on the party's soft left to influence the budget and beyond, in a move likely to further further unnerve number 10. Leading figures in the group have been pushing for Labour to take a far bolder and openly progressive approach in taking on both reform and the resurgent Green Party. Tribune, a group which dates back to the 60s, was reformed, not reforms, but reforms, by the Labour MP Clive Efford in 2017 under the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn, where members included Yvette Cooper and the former Labour leadership challenger Owen Smith. Remember him? But it had limited success during the Corbyn era and was effectively moribund under Starmer. MPs said that Efford had given way so that the new MPs could revitalise the group and make it a better organising force, with the first aim being to pile on pressure over the end to the two-child benefit limit in the upcoming budget. Now, figures involved with this soft left resurgence include Lucy Powell, who praised Zohran Mamdani's victory in New York, using familiar language. Congratulations to Zohran Mamdani on such a clear win in New York. His victory shows that boldness and a story of economic change in the interests of the many, not the few, defeats the politics of division and despair. Many, not the few, eh? Now, many of you will remember the Labour Party 2017 campaign led by Jeremy Corbyn that increased their number of seats, scored 40% of the vote and forced Theresa May's government into a hung parliament, with "for the many, not the few" being the campaign slogan. So, is this group looking to enhance the politics of the populist left? I wouldn't say so. A separate new group on the left was launched over the summer that appears to more explicitly back a change of leadership. Mainstream has the backing of the Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham and other MPs on the left, including Rachel Maskell and Clive Lewis. But several MPs said they had been turned off by the aggressive communications approach of the group and its focus on electoral reform, and believe Tribune would have more organising success within the party. Now, if this new group thinks that the newly formed centre-left mainstream is too bold, then what exactly do you think the soft left is going to be? Stephen, it's clear that Labour finally see the Greens as a threat, but given how many are fed up with the Labour Party, I mean, do you think they would even remotely be successful in winning back left-wing voters?
I mean, maybe those ones who've got amnesia. Maybe the ones who've had a bump to the head. I don't know anybody on the left who would dream of voting for Labour for a very, very long time. What are you voting for? That's the problem with Labour, is that the question is always, what are you voting for? And with Keir Starmer, unfortunately, what's happened constantly is you think you're voting for one thing and then you get something completely different when it becomes politically expedient. And he's been surrounded by people, including people like Lucy Powell, who don't seem to mind that, who've sort of enabled it, allowed it, continued. That there is nothing in the Labour Party that would draw anyone from the left back to them, no matter what kinds of policies they made, precisely because they've been nothing but deceitful the entire time they've been in power and before. So, they kind of are like the Lib Dems after the coalition in a way. I'll admit this. I voted for the Lib Dems in 2010, and I did so largely on the ground promises over student fees. And of course, it was like completely abandoned, and they turned into a party that aided in the killing of, hundreds of thousands of people through austerity. Labour is, I think, very much bears a similar burden. They haven't, inflicted austerity, but they've hardly relieved it. And they've proved themselves to be really untrustworthy. And I think that's the fundamental issue for people on the left is, if you really have a vision of how the country could be different and better for most people, for the many, not the few, most people who live in it. If that's the horizon that you dream of, you don't dream of the Labour Party, a party that's just going to spit in your face as it did the last time around. You dream of a party that is genuinely oriented towards that horizon. That partly explains the success of the Greens. They are currently oriented towards that horizon, although they haven't always been. And it also explains, unfortunately, what can sometimes look like the squandered potential of your party, which would have been oriented entirely in its structure towards that horizon. I'm, not giving up on them yet. But I'm also a romantic. Labour Party. I mean, they've got no hope, absolutely no hope of drawing the left back. I mean, of course, there are various kinds of, quite soft left figures who, just hate the idea of a more complicated left with the more complicated kinds of arguments that the left has to have amongst itself. They feel excluded from that, and I think they certainly also they also don't feel. They often don't have, I think, the kind of either lived or sort of theoretical kind of background that allows them to make the kinds of policies that will help people, or that will restructure the country in a way that makes it a country in which people are able to flourish. They're really trained in this way of always sort of clinging to the side of centrism, which means that it means they don't have anything radical about them. And the left, if it's anything, has got to be something that's fairly radical. So I think Labour is done for the left. The left is done with Labour, long done with Labour. There's very little they can do now to get them back, I think.
I mean, I don't think you're romantic for having hope for your party, because I still have a little bit of hope too. I know there's many people on the ground. I think Max Shanley is proposing some sort of democratic program, so it remains to be seen on that. I suppose because I brought up a tweet from Lucy Powell about Zoran Mandani, really, really strange seeing a lot of Labour MPs come out and praise him. Not to mention Wes Streeting. Wes Streeting was praising Mandani. I want to ask about that. What's this phenomenon? I'm actually quite confused. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, it's called desperation, Curtis. It's called total desperation. They've seen a success somewhere, a resounding success, a kind of success that they dream about when they're on holiday, and they want to be close to it. And it's the kind of success that they are never ever going to have again. And so the further away it drifts from them, the closer and closer they want to get it, to the point where they're prepared to be so obviously hypocritical and shallow by being like, "Oh, Mamdani's one of us. Good for him." Blah, blah, blah. They would have axed him from the Labour Party years ago. There's no way that Mamdani would have been if he was in Britain, a candidate for mayor of London, for example. He would have been expelled, and he would have probably been put in front of some kind of committee. Mamdani is not a Labour person at all. Mamdani is a socialist, and there are no socialists in Labour anymore because Labour doesn't want them.
There is this phenomenon, though, which is that British MPs or British journalists romanticize radical politics when it's abroad.
Of course.
They always do it, don't they? I think it reminds me of the Guardian editorial, which is like, oh, they really believe in left-wing politics when they've got a Blairite as Labour leader. But then when Jeremy Corbyn became Labour leader, it was trash him. And now he's gone. It's back to actually the two-child benefit cap is bad. It's like they pretend to care about these things because they know it has no effect on power. No, Zoran is, elected mayor or mayor-elect in New York, has nothing to do with us, so they can say that. But desperation is definitely a good way of putting it. I think we need to move on, though, because we've still got another 2 stories to go through. But I do just want to say that before we continue, I want to remind our viewers that we are 5 volunteers keeping this ship going. We do this around our paid jobs. Our goal is to become full-time, meaning we can increase our content, be far more ambitious, and build a sustainable left-wing alternative. Your help has made so much of a difference already, from equipment to covering rallies and interviews. Your support means everything. We rely on small donations, so if you want to be part of a media organisation that seeks to destroy the oligarchs, then please head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There you can support us monthly on Patreon, or there is another link for a one-time contribution. You can also become a YouTube member for 99p. Thank you. Other outlets are also available. Let's move on. An extremely worrying new trend among young boys seems to be resulting in harmful attitudes toward women. A new report from Male Allies UK finds that young boys don't view women's rights as important, and that they substitute AI for real human connection. The Boys in Schools report, which surveyed over 1,000 boys aged 11 to 15 across 37 British schools, found that boys are increasingly reliant on digital communication and struggling to define what masculinity means in today's world. Over half of those surveyed, 53%, said they find the online world more rewarding than real life, while a similar number, 54%, said the real world feels more interesting, suggesting a tension between wanting real-world connection and finding it easier to exist online. As The Independent reports, many boys are also turning to chatbots for companionship and emotional support. One boy said, "I have AI friends and girlfriends. They are always there when you feel bored." While another explains, "I talk to an AI app. It makes me feel like I'm not on my own." But the same online spaces that comfort them are also sowing mistrust and confusion. The report found that boys are split between believing everything online is fake and viewing certain sexist voices as part of a new system that reflects truth. A vast majority, 82%, said they don't trust UK politicians either. Well, none of us do. When it comes to gender equality, opinions were equally mixed. While most boys said women's rights are important, 45%, or very important, 23%, nearly a third, 32%, said they're not. And though 58% believe feminism has made the UK a better place, over half, 54%, think boys have it harder than girls today. Some said they feel that girls are celebrated while boys are seen as part of the problem. And I think that last bit demonstrated something very real. Now, I'm going to get a little bit personal for a second, because I think, sharing this is important, actually. So, when I was younger, I certainly harbored reactionary views. Now, even though I always saw myself sort of on the left, even before I knew what it meant, I hated the fact that, people had multiple yachts and there's, you got homelessness. I always knew that inequality was a problem and the system was for the rich and powerful, right? I knew the system was unfair. But I definitely had sexist views. As young as maybe 13 years old, maybe younger, I had these views because I was watching YouTube at a very young age, and the algorithm, even back then, was completely biased towards right-wing content, especially when it comes to culture and social justice. Now, some watching may remember the SJWs, and it stands for Social Justice Warriors, and it basically kind of mocks the idea of a white woman with pink hair being overly aggressive about feminism. And I could completely identify with the sentiment that women are celebrated and boys are blamed. Having that pre-existing view and then seeing discourse, which is that, men suck and all men are bad, etc., that only compounded my view. Now, luckily, I grew out of that, and now I understand the context of a system that pushed and pushes women down, and the celebration of them isn't to mock men, but to understand historical injustice. But as a 10, 11, or 12-year-old, you're not going to understand that. But you'll certainly understand women are bad, they have it too good, they blame men for everything. This, underpinned with feeling insecure, you're going through puberty, you're sexually insecure, and that feeling really drove misogynistic views. It drove mine. Now, again, luckily for me, it never extended beyond watching YouTube videos and internally being angry at women. I didn't ultimately treat people any differently, but having conversations with fellow young boys and men, that feeling was shared. Now, I'm happy to announce that I'm very socially progressive now. But I think this next paragraph really, really explains a lot. The majority of boys, 79%, also said it isn't clear to them what masculinity means. As one put it, people always say what it shouldn't be, but don't say what it is. Another added, it's toxic. That's all I ever hear. Now, I don't think men in general, in fact, society as a whole, really grasp what masculinity means. So young boys have no hope, especially if the message to young boys, or the message that they hear, is that simply showing any kind of masculinity is seen as toxic. That pushes them even further into that toxicity. Stephen, I know I gave my personal account, but what do you think is driving this?
I think it's really hard to say. I mean, I think there are lots of easy answers. Like, so for example, Andrew Tate. I mean, I have a 14-year-old daughter. She has friends who are boys. A lot of them know about Andrew Tate. there is a lot of make me a sandwich kind of banter. Is it banter? I don't know. I mean, she seems to take it as that, although sometimes she gets angry with them and then, puts a stop to it. But they tend to listen. I mean, to me, it seems like, there wouldn't be an appetite for people like Andrew Tate if there wasn't something there for him to sell. If there wasn't some need in the marketplace. So the question is, where does that need come from? And I find it really striking, this discussion, that statistic about not knowing what masculinity is. I mean, I don't know what masculinity is. I'm also not particularly interested in what it is. And I think, like, women don't sit around asking, well, there is a group of women who sit around thinking about what femininity is or what womanhood is. But I think most women don't spend a lot of time wondering about what femininity is. And I think they don't even necessarily spend a lot of time thinking about themselves in those terms. And it's maybe that as that kind of has drifted away, the idea of a kind of enforced femininity amongst women, an idea of enforced masculinity amongst men has drifted away as well. And the difference is that in lots of ways, life has massively improved for women. And I don't think that life has got massively worse for men, but I think definitely dissatisfaction has grown and grievance has grown. And I'm not saying that, it's the question of whether the grievance is legitimate or not. I mean, I suspect it isn't, but I also think it's probably irrelevant, because grievance itself is enough to do a lot of powerful things. It's enough to do a lot of powerful things politically. It's enough to do a lot of powerful things psychologically at the level of the individual, and drive people towards a way of like resolving the sense of grievance that they have. How you tackle that sense of grievance, I think, is very, very difficult. And I think that, it's there will be socio-economic conditions that give rise to it. I'm sort of talking myself into a kind of dead end here, because I don't know what the answer is. But I do think that, like, persistently trying to like talk about the question of masculinity is maybe a mistake. Like, why not just talk about being a good person, or why not concentrate in the idea of developing oneself as an individual, whether you're male or female, in accordance with your interests. I think I always struggle to know what people are talking about when they talk about masculinity, and I'm a man, and I don't know.
I think it's kind of strange that we have in some ways radically changed when we think about gender, but also society really does stick to traditional gender roles, and I think society really does push masculinity on people, because if you're a young boy, I mean, a lot of behaviors are learnt, right? I mean, I don't think masculinity should need to be a problem, should need to be a thing. And if society doesn't teach people that, oh, well, you've kind of got to be masculine in one way or another, then young boys who don't get taught, they're going to grow up and think, I just want to be a good person. And you think it'd be as easy as that, but I still think that we live in a society that really values so-called masculinity. I do want to ask you, though, I mean, do you think there's maybe some failure on the left? Or do you think there's more we can do? Or actually, do you think that this idea that the left isn't doing good enough for young men and boys, do you think that in of itself is overblown?
Yeah, I mean, there's often this argument, like, we've had it quite a lot this year, about whether the left is putting men off because of kind of what's sometimes called like liberal progressivism, or that kind of thing, where the argument is something like, oh, if you treat people with respect, then boys and men aren't going to be interested. And I just think that's like a really, really bad argument. I mean, I think it is true, and I have a friend who I've had lots of arguments with this, who, she's a woman. She runs a women's service in London, which involves, she works daily with women who've, suffered domestic abuse, sexual abuse, who've been imprisoned because of the men that they've been with. She's surrounded by women who are, the victims of a kind of masculinity. And there was a stage where I was arguing that look, we have to meet like working class boys, or boys where they are, and try and draw them into a common project, a common communal project, which is the left. And she would say, but you can't just bring them in, because those have to be safe spaces that are safe, and until they change, they can't be welcome, because there's the sense that other people in those spaces will be unsafe. And so I think there has to be, I think there's something really true in that. But I do think that, like there's often said that, in some way the left is love. And so approaching, thinking about boys and men and, their problems with masculinity in a kind of, loving developmental way is how the left should approach them. So not in an exclusionary way, but at the same time, love can also be tough. And sometimes it needs to be tough as well. I know I'm talking in like very vague terms. I just think this is like, it's such a big problem, and it really breaks my heart to think about all those boys who think of AI companions as company, as a solution to their loneliness. That's one of the saddest things I think I've ever heard.
No, I mean, appreciate that this kind of topic is an everyday conversation that's ever changing and developing. So it's something me and you can't solve it in 10 minutes. It's a difficult topic, and one where I like to talk a lot, but one where I find I can't on this, because I don't know what the right answer is. I mean, I couldn't even really pinpoint to you when I let these silly views I had go. It could simply because I grew up and that's it, and there was nothing that pulled me out, or there could be something I really don't know.
Okay,
but
sorry.
Please.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think I had a very different experience growing up, where I'm not I'm not a super masculine man in any way. Like I'm never really into like team sports or anything like that, and it was often like sort of picked on at school. I mean, I found like other boys at school to be like a source of fear, and actually it was like women who were my companions and my friends and protectors as a result. And so I don't ever think I had, I guess I don't think I ever went through that experience of feeling the kind of loneliness that is maybe described here and maybe described in your story, and even like the socioeconomic stuff. I definitely felt that, but I felt that really as a socioeconomic problem. It's like about poverty. But I think maybe I don't know. There's some way in which there must come a point at school, for example, where boys start to cluster with boys, and then that's when the kind of networks of like some sort of masculinities that begins to build. And maybe that's like the mistake. Maybe there should be like less of that kind of segregation early on, and try to keep it as unsegregated as possible for as long as possible, so that actually women have a chance of or girls have a chance of being friends with boys. Being present to them as human beings all the way through.
I really, really agree with that sentiment, because, I mean, and I can imagine this being replicated for many young boys, but secondary school was where the teenage pressure comes in, and there's that weird segregation actually between boys and girls. I mean, when you're in primary school, you don't care, and we should, like, we kind of miss that sort of youthful, we'd say it naivety, but actually something incredibly intelligent in being young and not finding these weird divisions, which the so-called grown-ups, the adults, create these divisions, whether it's based on race, sex, and gender and religion. So I feel that quite deeply, the last part you said. I would love to continue, but it's 8:15 and we have another story to get through, so we are going to move on. But on to our final story. The Maccabi Tel Aviv Aston Villa game in Birmingham erupted into chaos. Now, 11 arrests were made, all men and young boys, after there were clashes outside the Villa Park Stadium as a pro-Palestine demonstration took place. West Midlands police arrested 5 people on racially aggravated crimes. According to The Guardian, they claimed they overheard a police officer saying that the far right was present and said they had seen people swearing and making gestures at the Palestine protesters. Now, no surprise that some are claiming the Palestine protests are anti-Semitic. This is what a counter demonstrator said. Jill Chant, 76, said she was shocked by the ban and came to the stadium to protest against the anti-Semitism and the banning of Israelis from coming to Birmingham. Her husband, Stephen Chant, 79, wore a Maccabi shirt and said he believed the ban was nothing to do with football, it's all to do with sectarian politics, to be precise, anti-Semitism. Now, isn't that exactly what they're doing? I mean, the idea that sectarian politics only comes from the Palestine wing is wild to me and patently not true. What about the sectarian politics of Israel? I mean, we literally have Labour friends of Israel, Conservative friends of Israel, the very powerful Israeli lobby. We have lots of people within the mainstream media and political parties and politicians that push a pro-Israel agenda. In fact, we had the Prime Minister stand with hooligans who have been violent, Tel Aviv Maccabi hooligans, right? Who are violent, who've chanted death to Arabs, who have a literal rape song, right? They were rightfully banned. And Keir Starmer, instead of standing with the people of Birmingham and the West Midlands police, right, he stood with Israeli football hooligans. And you want to talk about sectarian politics. Now, I do agree there is an element of sectarian politics when it comes to Gaza. I think the independent MPs who were elected largely won on that ticket. But guess what? It's not just Muslims. Everyone, I'd say most people cares when we're aiding and abetting a genocide. But I do find it funny when the mainstream media and people say, oh, it's sectarian politics because you're angry at ethnic cleansing and genocide, but no one talks about Israel and the fact that Israel has money behind him and does influence on politics. Think of America and AIPAC. But again, the media doesn't talk about sectarian politics in that way. Now, the right-wing media have been in overdrive, painting a narrative that the chaos is because of Muslims and pro-Palestine demonstrators.
What was your reaction to the events of the game last night?
I thought this was a shameful night for Britain, and thankfully the game and the surrounds passed off with relatively little violence. But to be clear, that was only because you'd had Jewish people being told that they simply were not allowed, Israeli Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, that they were not allowed to attend. And the sight of masked, fully quasi-military men in quasi-military gear chanting vile anti-Semitic slogans, effectively some of them going on a hunt for the Jewish team, trying to find which hotel they were in so that they could intimidate and harass them, bring shame on our country. And it needs to be a wake-up call for the political establishment, who I'm afraid to say, and I have count myself as part of this in the past, have simply closed our eyes and our ears to the level of segregation in some of our towns and cities, and the intolerance and hatred that has bred.
I mean, military men, people holding Palestine flags are military men. That clip felt like a bingo card of get in my talking points, whack, whack, whack. Now, that was Lord Walney with a litany of unsourced claims that they were chanting anti-Semitic abuse and were hunting down Jews. Now, this is what the Telegraph ran with. British Islamism is flexing its muscles more and openly as it rises to power. Reform Deputy Leader Richard Tice shared the article, and he said, discrimination wins on shameful night at Villa Park. Anti-Semitism openly on display. Appalling. I find that quite ironic because the Brighton and Hove Reform Party made an AI image of a very horrific anti-Semitic trope of Zach Polanski, which they forced to delete. Funny that. Now, Politics Joe did a series of Vox Pops. This is them asking Birmingham residents their thoughts.
This is England, it's Birmingham. If Palestine means that much to them, why don't they live there? This is a football match.
Well, it doesn't surprise me, know what the media in this country are like, but it's sort of been a bit over the top.
We're saying that FIFA have already decided to mix politics and sport by allowing Israeli teams to participate in UEFA and European competition. And that's one of the main reasons that we're out here.
Where FIFA and UEFA are concerned, they're a bunch of thieves. And I wouldn't trust anything that any of them did. But it shouldn't prevent us being able to come to a football match in Birmingham.
We're a football club. We've been drawn against an Israeli team. It happens.
The club have been made scapegoats for everything as to what's gone on, but actually they're blameless in the whole situation. They just want the game to go ahead.
It's not the players' fault. It's not the fans' fault. To me, to be honest, I don't think their fans should have been banned from coming.
The Maccabi fans are known for violence. There's videos on YouTube from Amsterdam where you could hear them chanting death to Arabs. What they represent is a wider hatred, and we're here to protest that, as well as the genocide.
First of all, every football club, including Villa, including Liverpool, my team, have bad eggs. Are Maccabi Tel Aviv uniquely evil? No.
It's just pure anti-Semitism. There's no other way to it. Labour is anti-Semitic through and through. Vote reform.
No, please don't vote reform. Navarra Media's Simon Childs also went to Birmingham and documented what happened.
Up the Villa!
So there's now a standoff between some Aston Villa fans and the pro-Palestine demonstration. Started when basically it seemed like Aston Villa fans started chanting Villa songs at the pro-Palestine march. So at first I thought it was a kind of let's keep politics out of football kind of frustration. But a little while ago they started chanting about Tommy Robinson. So maybe it's a slightly different vibe actually.
Now, other footage shows that demonstrators were just peacefully protesting.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Up the Villa! Up the Villa! Come on, Villa, we want 3 points tonight. Kick us tonight. This is a very important announcement. Just to let everybody know, this is a static protest. We are not marching. There are a few speakers. We're going to be chanting. We're going to make sure that the Villa fans can actually hear us. They are our friends, and tonight we support Aston Villa.
I do take issue with that. They said that you should support Aston Villa. They should have said you should support Liverpool. But given the context that Villa was playing Maccabi Tel Aviv, I'll give them a pass. Now, young Bob, a new far-right figure who has been gaining traction, attended the protest. And ironically, this video shows him being confronted by a white person, and it was a brown Muslim man that calmed tensions.
Solidarity, a message that the people of Birmingham are not going to. What are you doing here?
Filming.
No violence, no violence.
He has a right to be here. Doesn't matter. We're going to protect him. He's in the
The man in question even said he had a right to be there, but Muslims are the problem. Now, some may be asking, why were there pro-Palestine protests there? Well, I personally think it was reasonable because we are hosting an Israeli football team. I think Israel should be banned from all sports. Now, I agree with the gentleman in the Politics Joe video, including Maccabi Tel Aviv, is political in and of itself. Now, despite politicians and the media claiming this is about anti-Semitism, it's finally being confirmed what we knew all along. Significant hooliganism within Maccabi Tel Aviv fan base is reason for Aston Villa match ban. Owen Jones took to Twitter to blast Lisa Nandy, who claims this was an issue of anti-Semitism. The West Midlands police have confirmed that Maccabi Tel Aviv fans were banned because of racist hooliganism. Lisa Nandy claimed it was because of anti-Semitism against them and smeared those who told the truth as anti-Semitic. She should resign. I think Lisa and many others should resign. Stephen, what do you make all of this? I understand, of course, Navarra put out a piece with Simon Childs. You spoke to Simon earlier as well, so I think you might have some pretty good insights.
What do I make of it? I mean, I think it's a really good thing that Maccabi was banned. I mean, there was a ban. Actually, it's the club's management that then withdrew the opportunity for tickets from the fans, and I think that was the right choice. I think that, given that there were 700 police officers out last night, they made 11 arrests for a range of offences that included possession of drugs, ignoring a dispersal order. There was some one person I think arrested for racist abuse, but we don't know where they come from. I think that seems like a pretty good outcome. Pro-Palestinian protesters had a chance to protest, as is their right, outside the football game about the presence of Israel in international football leagues. Some Maccabi protesters got to come along and protest against what they feel is an unfair exclusion of their club, also their right. And football fans were largely football fans at the stadium, also their right. It seemed to me, what happened last night is in many ways not a story. What happened last night is just, a kind of moment of, that match is a moment where a lot of political currents in the UK crossed in an interesting kind of way. So you had the sort of pro-Zionist side of things. It was around, even though it wasn't present physically so much. You had the pro-Palestinian side of things, and then you had this sort of emergence of the far right amongst, I think, a fairly small number of football fans, actually, Aston Villa football fans outside the stadium. So all in all, a sort of microcosm of the country in lots of ways, and not a huge deal. I think what is a huge deal, though, what is a massive deal, is the fact that our politicians, ministers in our government, misled us about why that ban was in place. And they misled us in a particularly dangerous way. And I say misled, I really want to say lie. They lied to us because I don't believe that they had not seen the intelligence on which West Midlands Police was basing its operational decisions. So I think they probably did see that, and it was inconvenient for them, given their politics and their sort of particular affinity with Israel. And so they lied to us. And they lied to us in this dangerous way where they managed to smear West Midlands Police as being anti-Semitic. Keir Starmer called the decision to ban the Maccabi fans anti-Semitism. Lisa Nandy stood up in Parliament and suggested that it was residents of Birmingham, people who live there, who were the threat, and that the ban had been put in place to protect Maccabi fans. We know that that's not true. We know that there was certainly part of the consideration that the police made, but that the overwhelming reason why they chose to put the ban in place was because of the Tel Aviv fans being violent. And some of that intelligence came from Amsterdam, where there was a report in Middle East Eye that reported, I think amongst the crowds were 500 to 600 skilled fighters amongst the Maccabi fans. There were former IDF soldiers. There was a lot of violence that was instigated by those fans. And also the tearing down of Palestinian flags in Amsterdam, which would not be as big a deal in Amsterdam as it would be if it happened in certain parts of Birmingham. So, the police made an extremely, I think, wise decision, and the government decided to blame the police, call them anti-Semitic, and slander the good people of Birmingham as being risks to Jews who came to visit the city for a football match. That is outrageous. I said on our show earlier, the sort of adults in the room view of the role of the state is that its primary responsibility is to keep its citizens safe. And yet, on this occasion, our government was prepared for reasons that are beyond everybody to allow the importing of dangerous fans into a community that would have been particularly dangerous, putting that community at risk. As I say, for reasons that we can't understand. The safety of the people of Birmingham was not at the forefront of our politicians' minds when they were criticizing this decision. And that is shocking. The lying to us and the disregard for the safety of the citizens of Birmingham, I think, are resigning offences. And I think Lisa Nandy should go, and I think Keir Starmer should go. They're both going to go anyways. It's just a matter of time. But, if they were honourable, I think they would really take a look at themselves and think, actually, I'm not fit to run this country.
I think you make a really good point where you say the protest last night wasn't a story, because whenever there's protest, you're going to get skirmishes, you're going to get arrests, right? The big story was the media framing this as something that's sectarian. We've used that word a lot today, actually. That this is about Islamism invasion. This is about, caring about other countries over this own country. That's the story. It's the way the media, in hock with politicians who've whipped up that, right? Because they're still pushing the idea this is anti-Semitic. What I will say, though, is our own Prime Minister couldn't stand up for Birmingham, nor can Lisa Nandy and many other people. The one person who did, though, was Ayub Khan, the independent MP, who obviously represents Birmingham. And when he did, when this whole story first transpired, when it came to the ban, he received the most disgusting, horrific Islamophobic abuse from people who are so-called nationalists, which I find quite ironic, because he was standing up for the residents of Birmingham against a foreign football team. That's very interesting. But I think your point about what happened last night, that isn't the story itself. It is the wider media apparatus playing their role. I do want to bring in Ben for our comments, because I know, especially you being on the show, there's going to be some brilliant comments for people in the chats. Ben, how are we doing?
Yeah, doing pretty well, I've marked a few comments. We'll try and keep an eye as well for any extras. But fantastic show as always, guys. Really appreciate you, Stephen, for coming on, especially after having hosted a show of your own on Navara.
Anytime.
And don't say that, because we'll hold you to it. Okay, so Sailor Jerry Swallow gave $2. I'm just going to go through the super chats first. And the comment apparently was $2 from Sailor Jerry Swallow. And Carl gave £2 and said, some men just want to watch the world not burn, in reference to in reference to the good guys.
Is Carl saying we're all Batman, not the Joker who said it?
Yes. Yeah.
None of us are billionaires, though.
Presumably that makes you Batman. So have a look internally, because I watched a YouTube video essay which suggested that Batman is a fascist. So work on yourself, Curtis. Right. So Jacob R became a YouTube member, and Specs Bean Farmer kindly, as ever, Specs.
Good to see you on
gifted
there
5
again.
turn left memberships. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. We know our regulars, and another one of our regulars, absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, Jim. Jim Speaks, gifted 5 turn
I hope
left memberships
Jim
as well.
doesn't feel so smug now, because at the beginning of the show he was like, you've misled on the thumbnail. Curtis is wearing a blazer. He's not going to wear one. I've now worn my favourite blazer today. So Jim, I hope you're feeling very happy with yourself and smug. But also, thanks to the turn left memberships.
Yep. We'll wait until after they donate to clap back at them, please. So Neon Visuals just became a YouTube member, and Adriana Websdale gifted 5 turn left memberships. Thank you, Adriana. Andrina. Sorry, I totally misread your name there, Andrina. Thank you so much, guys. That's absolutely fantastic. Let's have a look at some of the comments which I starred. Jim Speaks. I don't think I starred this one. This might have been Curtis starred this one. Did you star this one?
Yeah, sorry.
He's called my bluff. What bluff did
the blazer thing? He said at the beginning.
Oh right, yep, it's the blazer. No, that makes sense. Okay, that makes sense. Cool. Natalie, friend of the show, said, when Piers Morgan tells people he's a centrist, then the left consists of actual centrists and the left. I remember Tim Pool doing this as well. I feel
Musk.
Yeah. Oh, did Musk do it? I can't remember.
Said
Musk
he's a
saying
centrist.
that he's a centrist. Oh, okay.
Why
I feel
would you
like
want to be a centrist? Why would you call yourself a centrist?
I know.
It's so embarrassing.
That's got no
I
source.
have an opinion.
yes, literally.
Exactly.
There's a beautiful quote from Clement Attlee. We know what happens to people who sit in the middle of the road. They get run over, which is iconic, absolutely iconic. Yes. And it's proving true. I had a couple of comments from Alice Player, who said, reform, keep using Trump lines. Think it will translate over here. They're eating the swans, just didn't hit. Are reform copying the Trump train too much, or are they unique enough that they've got appeal in Britain?
You want to take this,
Either
Stephen?
one of
Oh
you.
yeah, I was going. Okay, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think, I think actually it's sort of larger than Trump, and it's much larger than Reform, which is it's not so much about like the lines, but it's rather there's this kind of concerted effort to create a picture of kind of civilizational collapse, and I think that is something that is coming out of America, and it's a very joined up right in America, the UK, parts of Europe, which are all pushing this narrative of civilizational collapse. That Jake Wallace-Simpson, Simons rather, article that you showed from the Telegraph, where he talked about Islamism flexing its muscles. That article is all about civilizational collapse, and it's about Islam causing it, and its migration causing it. That is, I think, the real messaging around the right. Reform is part of that, and it sometimes engages in that kind of messaging a lot. Trump is part of that. Musk is really part of that. It's a big kind of wave of fear mongering, and I think sometimes it does hit. I mean, the eating the swan stuff, I think, didn't, but there is a larger vibe of things are risky, and it's all coming out in this concerted kind of way. And I think that does sometimes hit, not as well as people would like, but it could grow.
I think the Tory party, some elements of the Tory party have definitely bought into that as well.
Robert Jenrick just loves filming himself on a backdrop of made-up civilizational collapse. That's his shtick.
He's really lost the plot.
Yeah, he's
but yeah, that's absolutely true. It's about a wider narrative that even if it doesn't hit every single time with Reform are not alone. They're working in tandem with the Tory party and other right-wing, far-right sort of voices that saying we are under civilization collapse, and the message there is Islam, Muslims, people of color, rather than the left-wing analysis, which is that, well, we're under civilization collapse because of austerity and people's basic needs aren't being met. I guess for some people, one sounds sexier than the other, unfortunately.
Can I give one little piece of analysis of why I think it is, just very, very quickly?
Yes.
Please do.
But I think that part of the focus of the right is to return us to the idea of like very enclosed nations. And the purpose of that is that the reason for that is that very enclosed nations are easy to control and easy to exploit. Whereas the left has always been about, some parts of the left are anti-nation, some parts of the left are like very internationalist in an extremely kind of literal way. But in general, it's about the common currency of humanity and in all its variety, sort of being part of a workers' project or understanding their own economic situations as intertwined. And that is what the right hates, and so it wants to drive us back into these enclosures where we don't understand how we're related to each other economically and in other ways, but everything outside is the enemy.
That's an excellent point.
Yeah, it's an excellent point, and that their method of driving you back is the sort of kinetic chaos that you were talking about before, very much linked to anti-feminism, very much linked to sexual insecurity, anti-feminism, and the sort of idea that you need that kinetic movement. You need people like Trump who say it how it is and are doers rather than thinkers, because thinking is ultimately emasculating, which actually leads us quite nicely on to the other things we want to talk about, because Alice Player, again, with another great comment, said girls' emotions are hyper-focused on. They're taught hyper-responsibility and very self-critical, but also self-aware. Boys aren't. They're disconnected from themselves, undisciplined, but feel unseen. Is there something practical that we can suggest that could sort of reverse this trend and help young boys to have that sort of like emotional self-regulation that we can think of?
Well, a lot of I suppose there are all kinds of run-of-the-mill answers like, oh, play more sports, do team sports, that kind of thing. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure I agree with the premise of this comment. I mean, it's true. I think that girls are rewarded for sort of hyper responsibility and care of other people and so on and so forth, and boys aren't. But I think boys are also self-critical, and I think boys are also often hyper-responsible, but the way that they manifest the anxiety that comes with that is in quite different ways. Like self-criticism is when self-criticism goes to a sort of extreme kind of level, it's manifested differently in girls than it is in boys, and that's to do with like the gendering of society. And I think, again, I'm talking myself around into a circle here, but I think I don't want to essentialize boys and girls in this kind of way where, there's essentially like self-critical and essentially non-self-critical, or undisciplined and disciplined. I think those are learned behaviors, and they're responses to internal features which are probably the same between boys and girls, but just are taught to be manifested in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think as well as in the behaviors for men and boys, especially me when I was younger, came out in anger. A lot of my emotion was very angry. Strange now, I don't feel quite angry anymore, but definitely when I was younger, going through puberty in secondary school, it really manifested in anger, which was quite destructive, and it was coupled with anxiety as well, which is I spoke to a therapist when I was younger, and they said like anxiety and anger are very similar symptoms, and it comes from that. And then not too long after, I was diagnosed with anxiety. So that's very interesting insights there. And Alice, I thank you for that comment. I think I need to sit with that to respond.
Yeah, I think it is a really interesting discussion, and it's a shame that it's come up on a show where we've got like 4 stories, because it'd be good to go into a more in-depth discussion about it. I did want to pick up on this comment. Brent said, "Yeah, masculinity is branded as toxic from the word go." Now, I wanted to just put my own 2 pence in on this one, because I think that when we talk about toxic masculinity, too often people talk about toxic masculinity and expect you to just know what that means. Like it's just sort of expected that you should understand and know what that means. And I think it's worth sort of defining what we mean by that. So when I talk about it, I tend to talk about, at its core, the idea of toxic masculinity is like the shaming of men for a lack of this arbitrary thing, masculinity, which sells to us the lie that we should already be in control. The idea that we should never back down, we're always in competition with other, maybe more violent men, and we should always be fearless, like take the pain of what's around us. And in all this process, emotions are equated to us with shame. So men are, we're taught to hide emotions. And that lack of control, it's both material and social, leads to the perpetuation of violent ideas to take control back by ham-fisted means. It's what Bell Hooks referred to as patriarchal violence. It's actually the opposite of stoicism, which is the acceptance of your lack of control. Like Stephen did philosophy, so he might have some familiarity with Zenos of Cyprus, the founder of Stoicism. And the idea of Zenos of Cyprus was that he lost all of his possessions and had to come to terms with that. And of course, that is the polar opposite of Andrew Tate, and that is the distinction ultimately between healthy masculinity and toxic masculinity, is your ability to be truly stoic and accepting of circumstances. Not to say that you can't be moral, but to not attempt to keep a tight control of what's around you, and the violence that kind of comes in with that. It's in no way saying that masculinity itself is toxic. I don't know if you guys want to add anything to that.
I thought that was very well put. I thought that was great. I thought that was great.
I couldn't top that. Yeah.
But I mean, I think it also connects to the thing that I was saying on, is that like such a motor for anger amongst men, or is kind of grievance. And at the Stoic point is that there shouldn't be there's grievance is the wrong thing to feel. It's wrong to feel it in a way, like it's wrong not in some kind of universal moral sense, but rather because it doesn't do anything, and it doesn't change anything, and it doesn't serve anything. It's wrong for you. It's bad for you. And yeah, I think that point about control, and yeah, I think that's a very good one. I think it's really good. I think that's very nicely put.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of this conversation has to come down to. Emma VB was very complimentary about Curtis and said, "Good on you, Curtis, for your honesty. I think there's a lot of strength in owning your past and talking about how you've learned more and changed your views, and more people should do this." I want to echo Emma's comments, Curtis. I think you did really well there.
I quickly before we move on,
Yeah,
I did want to say, because Jimmy the Giant, I think he was well into the alt-right pipeline, but he's quite open about it. I think when people do discuss elements of their life which they now don't agree with, I think the more people that discuss it might encourage other people to think that you don't have to stay in that camp forever. I personally think it could be a good way to bring people out of this particular pipeline. If people say, look, I used to believe that, now I don't, and here's how, there might be some people who, unfortunately, the way people work is, might let go a lot of those views, but through fear of being shamed, they kind of stay in that bubble and they don't sort of put their feelers out because they're scared that they're going to be criticized, when it's absolutely okay to have messed up opinions if you want to learn and grow.
Maybe we need old-fashioned consciousness raising groups for men. Just, as sort of second wave feminism. Consciousness raising groups. Men get together. They talk about things, the ways in which they've changed and become healthy, and and why they went through those experiences.
There you go, Ben. You've got
Stephen,
got a task on your hand.
No, you are brilliant. You read my mind, because I happened to have a list compiled in a document that I had, and that was exactly what I was going to say next. Is that for men's mental health support, there is, for example, the Movember Foundation. There's the Men's Shed Association, the Mankind Initiative, not to be confused with the store, which is Menkind. Okay, it's Mankind is the and that they provide domestic abuse support for men. There's Tough Enough to Care, Men's Minds Matter. There's Respect, which is a men's advice line. And it's important also to say that there are feminist men's groups who intervene and help men, like breaking down these ideas that by the way, hurt men and women. So there's the National Organization for Men Against Sexism, known as NOMAS, which was started in the 1970s to free men and women from patriarchal oppression. But there's also the White Ribbon Campaign, which is the largest charity in the UK, run to tackle toxic masculinity, the proliferation of the Red Pill movement, and harmful stereotypes, and the Good Lad Initiative. And those last two are particularly interesting because what they do is they bring young men and boys into their sort of seminar things, and they'll show them like a clip of Andrew Tate or something like that, and then they'll give them critical frameworks and let them lead where that logic goes. I think, well, where do you think this line of logic actually goes? And when people think through it so often, it gives people a good shield to protect themselves against those ideas. So they're good. That's the Good Lad Initiative and the White Ribbon Campaign, if people want to check them.
I'm glad you. Oh, sorry, go on. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, not at all. Not at all.
I was going to say, I'm glad you mentioned how bad patriarchy is, or how bad masculine desire for dominance is for men. And you quoted Bell Hooks earlier, and I think in a paper just called Patriarchy, Bell Hooks says something like, there is a scourge that is sweeping this land, killing our men, and it is called patriarchy. Men die younger. Men are more likely to die violently when they're young. They are more likely to drink, smoke, engage in dangerous behaviors, and none of that is intrinsic.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the patriarchy only serves a particular kind of man, typically a wealthy white person in some sort of power. And I do think, especially the word patriarchy is quite triggering for people on men on the right as well, because they think it's automatically anti-men. Again, something that I used to believe. I used to roll my eyes at the word patriarchy and cringe because I automatically thought it was man-hating. And understanding that actually the patriarchy, or being against the patriarchy, is incredibly pro-woman and pro-man, because the patriarchy is about power, and traditionally, and still true today, wealthy white men. If you're a working class white man, or you're a person of color, or part of the queer community, you are attacked by the patriarchy, and I think that's obviously very important. There's a class element here too.
I think they I think often people imagine when you say patriarchy, I think sometimes people imagine that it's like the stonecutters from The Simpsons. It's like the people who go control everything around a big table with it's like a little cult thing, and that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is like there's a system of oppression that's grown from the historical suppression of women, and this is affecting all of our social and legal and political systems. It's not like an act of individuals, it's or kind of even group agency, but just a system, and that that system is so linked to the attribution of negative or harmful characteristics to men and women, by the way, based on gender essentialism, and saying that we need to adjust society in some way to account for these characteristics.
It's not the Illuminati, babe.
Exactly, it's not the Illuminati, babe. Brilliantly, but yeah, and I think that's a really I think that's a barrier that we need to start breaking down. But I did want to highlight this comment from Becca as well, because Becca said Stephen seems like a gentleman. That's a compliment, and I think that is we need more role models that are gentlemen. I think that's a good thing.
Thank you, Becca. That's very nice to hear.
Well, I mean, watching you on Navarra, and obviously we've interacted a few times. I've told people, Stephen's such a lovely man, really, really warm and really lovely. I'm trying to get a big smile on your face there, and you just seem like someone who has a warm embrace, and I think that's a huge compliment.
But listen, Curtis, I also work in the media, so I don't want to get a reputation for being nice.
Maybe you've got a side to you.
Tough but warm, kind but indefatigable. Is that how you say it? No, I didn't say it right. Anyway.
I knew what you meant. I'm not going to try and pronounce it now because I'll say it wrong. Fresh Candy, which is a brilliant name, by the way, said nobody has an. This is a reference to the Maccabi Tel Aviv fan. Excuse me. Nobody has an automatic right to come here. I thought right wingers would agree with that. So why did they want these people coming here? I don't know if you guys want to comment on that one.
It's intrinsic internal contradiction, I think, of right-wing politics, because I made that point earlier, where there's no real nationalists in this country, because we are arguing against other, when you hear the right wing saying, I hate globalism, but then these people are massively in support of foreign oligarchs. They love Elon Musk, for example. Elon Musk spoke at a Tommy Robinson rally. They seem to be very favourable to Israel. I mean, Tommy Robinson going to Israel. Like, that's a massive internal contradiction with so-called nationalists. And I think that's another one there, because I don't think the right-wing ideology, I would say that as a leftist, is particularly coherent. I don't think it is. They have an in and out group and that's it, but that can actually change. Same with sort of wokeness. Wokeness doesn't have a definition from these people. It's kind of anything they don't like. It's ever shifting, which is also tricky to try and combat because it's never static.
Yeah. Did you want to add anything to that one, Stephen? Or
no, I just think that what you say, Curtis, about the internal contradiction there is totally right, and I'm sure that many in your audience will have seen the way that my colleague Aaron Bastani wiped the floor with Matt Goodwin.
Beautiful!
Talking about foreign policy in Israel.
It was brilliant, wasn't it?
That contradiction comes out again and again and again and again, and the reason it comes out is because actually this is not about foreign policy or geopolitics; it's about racism, and if you're white, you can't be racist against a white ethno state like Israel, a largely white ethno state. Or you're a fan of ethno states, right? And Israel is an ethno state, so there's a kind of connection that way.
Yeah, that's what it boils down to.
That breaches this kind of closed borders sort of sense.
I mean, there was an interesting interaction on LBC a few years ago with someone from Patriotic Alternative. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that far-right political party that basically occupies online. They actually brigaded, this is the early stage of the channel, it was just me. They brigaded the channel. They came with all their lovely comments, and basically one of the members of the party called up LBC and was speaking in favour of Israel and wanted to replicate their policies. And their policies was of ethno-nationalism. So a lot of it is the support of Israel, because they'll say, oh, it's because we care about anti-Semitism. It's not. I think you're quite right, Stephen, to replicate that ethno-nationalism over here.
And it used to be Russia. I mean, Russia was also the source of money for the right, but it also represented a kind of ethno-nationalism that they enjoyed.
Yeah, Tim, Paul, we're looking at you.
Yes. And I did want to highlight just a couple more comments. Ollie Carpenter said, "Oh no, Curtis, you misspoke. Manchester
I
United
didn't.
was what you were supposed to say."
Literally. I mean, Everton are our official rivals, but I hate Manchester United, and they're my proper rival.
Yep. And Vegan Barnsley did say Stephen Methven is a good bloke, one of the best on Navarro Media. You're getting a lot of love in the comments.
Absolutely true, though.
That's so nice. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Do you have a regular hosting slot, or is it as and when? Because I'm not.
No, it's not my job. I mean, my job is to be the editor of the show, not to host it. But like whenever there's a gap or someone can't make it, or whatever, I'm always happy to jump in.
Well, I love watching it when it's you on anyway. So.
Thank you.
Yes, it's good to see. And I did. I'll bring in this comment from Natalie as well, because I think it's so. Yeah, it's such a nice little story. Natalie, friend of the show, said, "I do like that my chaperones for last night were two pro-Palestinian gay Muslim guys, which throws a wrench in the works for the far right. Everything they hate in just 3 people." I do think it's funny how they sort of try and represent Muslim men as ultra-conservative in the UK, I mean. And actually there is a cohort of particularly young Muslims whose parents moved here because they had more liberal values themselves, and these people had even more liberal or leftist value. These people have, even more liberal and leftist values. And I feel like they might be trying to bark up the wrong tree, trying to represent young Muslims in that way. Was there anything you guys wanted to add on that?
No, not really. I think that,
like I say,
right.
There is one young Muslim man who has a lot of charisma and sauce that we know, and that's Zohran Mamdani. We love him. Socially progressive as well, and they try to tackle him safely. Yes.
Why did I think you were going to say Zia Yusuf? I don't know why I thought you were going to say Zia
that
Yusuf.
charismatic guy. Yeah, Zia Yusuf.
Yes, very charismatic.
I would love to. I tell you what, I would love to debate him because I'm not trying to big myself up, but I would wipe the floor of him. Just saying.
Absolutely. We are all done with the comments, but I just wanted to say we do also have a Discord. I just want to give that a little shout out. We do also have a Discord, and I've noticed that there are a group of people, not a large group of people, so 10 or so people, who gather in the Discord afterwards and have a little chat. So if people do want a bit of community, there is that community there for you. I'm sure somebody can pop it in the comments. I am going to disappear, but thank you very much for answering all of my weird and wonderful questions, guys.
Thank you so much, Ben. I really appreciate it. Great comments. I just want to again give you appreciation, Stephen, because of course, if I'm correct, I think you're still in Navarra Towers.
I am, yeah.
Which means you've posted and we've dragged you for an hour and a half, and you still haven't gone home. You're still at work. So I do want to thank you for bearing with us for an extra long show. It was an hour and a half.
No, honestly, I really love coming on, and it's super to see you. Nice to hear what your audience has to say. Really enjoyed the chat tonight.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And of course, that is all we have time for. Thank you to our viewers who tuned in. And of course, thank you for Stephen for joining me. Remember to like this stream. And if you're not a subscriber, then please hit that button. If you want us to grow, then you can head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There is a link to our Patreon where you can support us monthly, or follow the other link to give us a one-time contribution. Again, other left-wing outlets are available. Alternatively, you can become a YouTube member for just 99p. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next time.